Good morning or good afternoon. Today we are going to be discussing one of my favorite topics in Algebra 1, and it is the FOIL method. The FOIL method is very, very important because this is going to lead to our quadratics that we're going to discuss in the following video. Then after that, that is going to lead into graphing our quadratics, exponential, and then diving deep into our star repetitious review. So the FOIL method is just pretty much just a distributed property twice. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at what we're going to do first with our FOIL method. And I am going to put this ink in black. So the way we do our FOIL method is that we're going to underline the first term of the FOIL. You see the term of b plus 7 and b plus 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to distribute the b into the b. And you know that b times b is b squared. So we are going to write that down. Then you're going to distribute the same b into the 1. And then you go 1 times b. Of course, 1 times positive 1 times b is positive 1b. And then we're done with this term. And what I like to do is I like to scratch it out. I go on to the second term. Then I'm going to distribute in green. I'm going to distribute the 7 into the b, and I'm going to distribute the 7 into the 1, and that is multiplication. So 7 times b is, of course, 7b. And then, of course, the last term, 7 times 1 is positive 7. And, of course, if you don't know how to multiply 7 times 1, all you have to do is put it into the decimals, and decimals will do it for you. And then, of course, we have simplification of terms here. We're going to underline the b, 1b, and we're going to underline the 7b. So you think about of cookies. You have 1 cookie plus 7 cookies gives us 8 cookies. Same thing, you have 1b plus 7b gives you 8 b's. So again, b squared is a term, b's are another term, and 7 is another term. So what you're going to do is you're just going to bring down the b squared. You're going to combine the 1b plus 7b, which gives you 8b. And then you're going to do positive 7. So once again, that is your simplified terms. You cannot go any further because you have 3 different types of variables. You have a b squared, a b, and a 7. That's like talking about a chicken, a cow, and a duck. You can combine them and just call them 9 ducks together. So again, that is a simplified version of the FOIL method. We're going to do a couple of practice problems so then that way we can get the hang of it. I am going to do it in blue. I'm going to underline my n, and I'm going to distribute the n to the n. N times n gives us n squared. Then I'm going to distribute the n to the negative 1. Then I multiply negative 1 times n is negative 1n. And I like to put my negative 1 so I can know it's negative 1. I'm done with that term with distributive. I'm going to go ahead and cancel it out. And I'm going to go this. And I'm going to go negative 10 times n gives me negative 10n. And then I'm going to distribute here. Negative 10 times negative 1 gives me a negative, gives us a positive 10. So then negative times a negative is a positive. And of course, if you do not know how to multiply negative 10 times negative 1, all you have to do is input it into decimals like we've done in our previous lessons, and it will do it for us. Then we get the combining like terms. We have the n, we have a negative 1n and a negative 10n. That gives you a negative 11n. So the final answer would be n squared because we don't have anything. Negative 1n plus negative 10n is a negative 11n. If you don't know how to do that, all you have to do is input it into decimals. Negative 1 minus 10, just the way it is, and it gives us negative 11 plus 10. And that is our finalized and if you look at that, you're really looking at our quadratics starting to happen. You start the b squared, you have the 8b, and you have the 7. That's really, really leading us into our quadratics that we're going to be discussing. So our next is, of course, m minus n, m minus n. So the first step, I'm going to underline it in blue. So I'm going to distribute m times m. M times m is m squared. And then I'm going to distribute the 10 and the m, and it's positive 10m, because of course a positive 10 times m is a positive 10m. I'm done with that, so I like to wipe it out. And then I go to the next one. I go negative 9 times m. It gives me negative 9m. and then I'm going to distribute the negative 9 into the 10, and I multiply it. Negative 9 times 10, positive 10 gives me a negative 90. And once again, all you have to do is input it into the decimals, and it gives you the answer. So you do the positive 10 and the negative 9, and you add them. Well, you add a positive 10 and a negative 9, so that gives you an m square, and this is an m. Then it gives me a positive 1m, and then that gives me a negative 90. Now I have three different terms, m square, I have an m, and I have a number, and that is my final answer. So once again, let me do a quick overview of the decimals in case you do not know how to get our decimals. We go right here, we go into our Google format, and we just search our decimals calculator. And of course, do not forget, you are going to put decimals calculator star version, and then I'm going to click on this. And then of course, if I don't know what negative 9 times 10 is, all I have to do is input it into the decimals, and decimals does all the work for us. And then I multiply times a positive 10, and then it gives me a negative 90. The other term that we discussed right here on this one, we have a positive 10 minus a negative 9. All we have to do is put in 10, and you can put a positive in front of it, but there's no need. And then you just put minus 9, and that gives us a positive 1. So that will give us our term. All our problems we do on decimals. So that is very easy for us to do. So once again, we have that. We're going to go on to the next one. I'm going to go ahead and simplify that one, enlarge our workspace, and then we're going to look at our next problem. We also have the FOIL method. You see the n minus 2, n plus 6. So what we're going to do is we're going to just start with the n. We're going to distribute the n into the n. N times n will give us n squared. And then I'm going to distribute here. A 6 times n gives us a positive 6n. And then I'm done with this. I like to wipe it out. So then I underline negative 2. And don't forget, it is negative 2, not just 2, because then you'll get the wrong answer. You have a negative 2 times n will give you a negative 2n. And then you go on to the next one. And then you're going to go ahead and do a negative 2 times 6, positive 6. It gives you a negative 12. And once again, if you don't know how to multiply a positive 6 and negative 2, all you have to do is input it into decimals like I did show you, and it will give us our answer. Once again, we're going to underline the like terms. We have a positive 6n and a negative 2n. There's no terms other than n squared, so we're going to go ahead and do n squared. A positive 6n and a negative 2n gives us a positive 4n, and then this gives me a minus 12. That is my quadratic, and that is my answer. So once again, our quadratics are, looking at these, this is my favorite part of the algebra because it's repetitious and it's the same exact thing over and over. And our FOIL method does jump straight into our algebra quadratics that we're going to be discussing next. And we're going to be using the same problems, except we're going to be putting x's onto them. So the same thing here, we are going to underline the n, and we're going to distribute the n times the n, and that gives me n squared. Distribute the n times a negative 9, and that gives me a negative 9n. I'm done with the n, so I scratch it out. Then I go on to my next term, negative 1. Don't forget, it's not 1. It is negative 1 times n. That gives me a negative 1n. And then I distribute a negative 1 times a negative 9 gives me a positive 9, because a negative 1 times a negative 9 gives me a positive. Negative times a negative gives me a positive. So I am going to underline this and this because they are like terms. So I'm going to, there's no other n squared, a negative 9n, and a negative 1n gives me a negative 10n. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and put it in decimals and it will give you the right one. You just input negative 9 minus 1. Positive 9, and that is my quadratic. And that is my square quadratic. So once again, very simple, very simplified that we do. Our next one is just a little complicated, but not really complicated. We just got to understand that this whole entire term is raised to the square. So we're just going to rewrite this and say, well, this is the same as writing b plus 8, and b plus 8. If you look at that, I just made an extra additional step, which just pretty much just converted that into b plus 8, because that's the same thing as writing b plus 8 quantity square, or b plus 8 to the second power, all quantity square. So then again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to underline the b, and I'm going to multiply b times b, and you have b times b, and it gives me b squared. I'm going to distribute the 8 and the b, so that gives me a positive 8b. And then I'm done with that, so I'm going to scratch it out. I'm going to go on to my next one, and I'm going to do positive 8 times b, and it's positive 8b. And then I'm going to do the last term, and it's positive 8 times positive 8, which gives me a positive 64. My next step is to combine like terms. I'm going to go ahead and underline the b's. That is the only like terms I have. So then the answer is b squared plus 16b plus 64. Why 16b? Because I am adding 8b plus 8b, which gives me a total of 16b. And then everything else does not have a term. So then again, I'm gonna circle my answer, and that is my FOIL method combined with b plus 8 quantity square. Now we're going to do the k's, and once again, this is repetitious after repetitious, whether it being an A, whether it being a B, whether it being a C, whether it being a duck, a chicken, or a cow, it's the same exact concept. So then we have k times k, and it gives you k squared, and remember our exponents, we have the 1 and we have the 1. And remember, when you multiply our exponents, k to the 1 times k to the 1, you add the exponents of k to the square. And then, of course, you distribute here, and it's negative 8 times k, and it's negative 8k. I'm done with this. I like to scratch it out. And I go negative 5 times k, which gives me negative 5k. And then, of course, I distribute like that, negative 5 times negative 8, which gives me a positive 40. Now I'm going to combine like terms. I have a negative 8k and a negative 5k. And I'm going to add only those terms. I'm going to bring down the k squared, and then the negative 8k minus a negative 5k gives me a negative 13k. And again, if you don't know how to add negative 8 plus negative 5 or negative 8 minus 5, all you have to do is input it into decimals and let decimals do the work for you. And then you bring down the positive 40, and that right there is your answer. The next one is the same exact thing. We are going to start off with the a. We underline it. We're going to distribute a times a, which is going to give us a squared. Going to distribute a times 9, which gives me 9a. I'm done with this, so I like to scratch it out. And then I'm going to underline this, and then I'm going to distribute into each one of those terms. And it's 2 times a is positive 2a. And then I'm going to distribute the 2 into the 9. 2 times 9 is positive 18. I don't know what positive 2 times positive 9 is. All I have to do is input it to the decimals, and you let the decimals do the work. You're going to underline your like terms. You're going to bring everything else down. A squared plus 11a plus 18. And this is my simplified quadratic. We're going to do another one. Very similar. And it's just repetition after repetition. And we are going to get to a little bit more complicated after we finish this page. So we have n and we have n. We're going to distribute n times n, which gives us n squared. Going to distribute n times negative 8. It's going to be negative 8n. I am done with the n, so I'm going to scratch it out. Then I'm going to go ahead and distribute 7 in the n, which gives me a positive 7n. And I'm going to distribute the positive 7 and the negative 8. And I multiply 7 times negative 8, which gives me a negative 56. And again, if I don't know what 7 times 8 is, or 7 times negative 8 is, it is 56. And all I have to do is input it into the decimals. Now I'm going to go ahead and combine like terms. I'm going to keep the n squared. A negative 8n and a positive 7n gives us a negative 1n. And then I got rid of this, so then I'm going to do negative 56, and that is my answer. Next, what I'm going to do is another one very similar. I'm going to distribute here. I'm going to underline the n, distribute there, n squared, because n times n is n squared. Then I'm going to distribute there, and n times negative 3 is negative 3n. I'm done with the first distributive. I scratch it out. I go on to the next distributive. I go -2 into the n, and that gives me -2n. And then I distribute -2 times -3, which gives me a +6. Now I'm going to combine like terms. I'm going to underline the like terms. The only like terms that are there is the n. And I'm going to go ahead and put n squared minus 5n +6. Because -3 minus 2 is -5. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and put it into the decimals and it will give you the right thing. So that is my simplified quadratic, n squared minus 5n +6. Let's do a couple more. And once again, the reason I do so much is because the more you practice, the more you'll get good at the FOIL method and the better you will get at quadratic. So once again, I'm going to underline the B. And it's good to pause the video if you want to pause the video and then do the problem, try it out. And if you understand the concept, then you understand the concept. If you come up to the right answer, then you come up to the right answer. So anytime that you would like to pause the video, you can go right ahead, try it out, and then see if the work is done correctly. So then I'm going to distribute the b to the b, and that gives me a b squared. Once again, b squared. And now I'm going to distribute the b to the -2, and that gives me a -2n. So I have that. Then I'm done with that. I like to scratch it out. And then I'm going to go ahead and distribute the -4 to the b, and that's going to be -4b. And once again, I made a little mistake, so all I do is erase it. And then I put a b right there, because I was back on my ends. So remember that -2 times b is -2b. Okay, now we're correct. So then now we distribute the -4 times, -4 times b is -4b, and then the last one is -4 times -2, gives me a +8. Now what I do is I combine like terms, I underline this one and this one, and of course if you don't know how to do -2 minus 4, then all you have to do is put it into decimals. Let me just go over this one real quick, just so we can know how to do it in the decimals. So then I'm going to shrink it down. I'm going to get rid of my previous work. And then all I have to do is input a -2, just the way it is, minus a 4. And it gives me a -6. And then, of course, before that, I had another term that I was looking at, a -4 times a -2. And then I get rid of this one. And then I go -4 times -2. Gives me a +8, and that is how I got a +8 right there. So once again, if you need additional help on the decimals, I have a video that has additional help on decimals part 1, part 2 that you can view and learn a little bit more from the decimals, because I'm trying to use a minimal amount of decimals here because we've already covered it before. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and combine like terms. I have a -2b and a -4b like we've discussed before. Going to bring down the b squared. It's going to be -6b +8. So I have my quadratic here, and it's b squared minus 6b +8. So that is our next answer. So we go on to the next one, and then now we have another quadratic. So we're going to do n times n, and that gives me an n squared. I'm going to start off with this one. Then I go +4 times n is +4n. I'm done with the n. I can scratch it out. And you have +2 times n, and I have +2n. And then I go +2 times +4, which gives me a +8. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the 4n and the 6n, so that gives me an n squared. A 4n plus a 2n is a +6n, and then that gives me +8 right there. So that is my answer. If I look at my next one, now I have this one. So the way I look at this one is I have 2 open parentheses n plus 9, close parentheses, open parentheses, n minus 6. It's just a bigger FOIL method, and there are a lot of ways to do this. I can do the FOIL first, and then I can distribute the 2 to every single one. But the way I like to do this is I like to underline this, because if you underline this, it looks like distributive property. So it's just an extra step of doing the distributive and put it in parentheses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in parentheses, and then I'm just going to bring down the n minus 6, because I'm not going to do anything to it. But the one that I'm going to do something to is a distributive property that we have done before. So all I'm going to do is multiply 2 times n, and that gives me 2n right there. And I'm going to multiply 2 times +9, which gives me a +18. Now, if you look at that, now we have our FOIL method. We have a 2n plus 18, open parentheses, close parentheses, and all that parentheses. So we have n minus 6. So once again, I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to underline the 2n, and I'm going to distribute. So I have 2n times n, which gives me 2n squared. So remember that 2n times n gives me 2n squared. Then I'm going to distribute with the blue, and I'm going to say, well, what's 2n times negative 6? Well, I multiply 2 times negative 6 gives me negative 12, so that is negative 12n. So once again, I'm done with this in green, and then I'm going to do the inside right here. And it's like I'm going to do positive 18 times n. It gives me a positive 18n. And then I'm going to distribute the positive 18 times a negative 6. And that is a more complicated problem. It's like if I can do it in my head, 9 times 54, 108. It's going to be 108. But let's say I can't do it in my head. I have my trusty Desmos here. And all I have to do is I'm going to multiply 18 times negative 6. All I do is input it in the calculator. 18 times negative 6. And it gives me negative 108. So 18 times negative 6 is negative 108. So whenever you need Desmos, you just bring him out and he'll work for you. You always let Desmos do the work. Now I'm going to underline by combining like terms. I'm going to have the negative 12n and the positive 18n. I'm going to go ahead and bring down the 2n. So this is my 2n squared. And this is going to be a fun quadratic to graph because we're going to have a lot of things going on with this quadratic. And then I have a negative 12n and a positive 18n, so that gives me a positive 6n. And then that gives me a 108. So I have my answer right here, and this is my simplified FOIL method. So this one took a little bit of extra work, but it's still the same thing. Understanding the distributive property, which we've done before, and understanding the FOIL method, which we've done before earlier in this video and in a previous video. So if I look at the next one is easy. Why? Because there's no FOIL method involved in this one. This one is just simple distributive property of 3 terms. So all I'm going to do, look at this. This is the entire distributive property. All I'm going to do is multiply and simplify. So you have 5 times 5, 5 times n squared, which gives me 5n squared. And then I'm going to distribute the 5 to the 2n, and that gives me a positive 10n. 5 times 2n is a positive 10n, and then I'm going to distribute it one more time, and it's 5 times 4. If you don't know what 5 times 4 is, put in your Desmos, and it will give you positive 20. Now I look for combining like terms. Do I have any combined like terms? I have, a little mistake, forgot my square. 5 times n is 5n squared. I always want to check my work. And then 5 times 2n is 10n, and a positive 20. So I have an n squared, I have an n, and a 20. They're all different creatures, so we're going to leave it alone. We'll do another one with distributive property first. So the first step is to underline my distributive property and know where my distributive property is. So I'm going to go ahead and put my distributive property here, and I'm going to do distributive property first. I'm going to do 2 times k, which is going to give me 2k. And then I'm going to do 2 times 5, which is going to give me positive 10. I am done with that. And no more parentheses. I want to put a double parentheses, but it's okay to put double parentheses because it's the same exact thing. I just have to put an extra parentheses in the front. I just bring this down right here, and let me get my eraser out. I'm going to bring this down right here, and I'm going to open x plus 6. Now I have our distributive property 2 times, which is our FOIL method. So I'm going to underline this, and I'm going to distribute to the k. So I'm going to move it up a little. So 2k times k is 2k squared. I'm going to write it right here. And then I'm going to distribute the 2k to the 6, and that gives me positive 12k. So I have 2k times k is 2k squared, and 2k times 6 is positive 12k. Okay, so I'm done with that. I scratched that out. I'm going to do my next terms in black. So I'm going to do 10 times k, and it's going to give me a positive 10k. And then I'm going to do 10 times positive 6. It's going to give me a positive 60. The last step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and combine like terms. I'm going to add the like terms. So I have 2k squared plus 12k and a 10k gives me a positive 22k. And then I just bring down the 60. So this is my quadratic right here. And this is my final answer. If I look at my next one, now I'm back to my FOIL method. And it is the same exact thing over and over and over. So I have my FOIL method, a minus 10, a plus 9. So I underline the a. I'm going to distribute the a times the a, and it gives me a square. I'm going to distribute the a times the 9, and it gives me 9a. Then I'm done with this. I scratch it out. I'm going to underline my 10, but then don't forget, I'm actually doing the negative 10. So negative 10 times a is negative 10a. And negative 10 times 9 is negative 90. And once again, if you don't know how to do that, all you do is multiply negative 10 times 9, and it gives me negative 90. You can input that also on your decimals. I'm going to underline my like terms. That is the only like terms I have. In green, I'm going to simplify. So my simplified term is, let me go ahead and erase this. My simplified term is a squared because there's no other a squared. And then I'm going to add the 9a and a negative 10a, which gives me a negative 1a minus 90. And that is my simplified form, and I'm going to go ahead and circle it. The next one that I'm going to be doing is an x, which now we're going to start looking at our quadratic, and it looks pretty nice with the quadratic because it's going to give us an x squared, and that's the term that we're going to use with decimals. So we're going to go ahead and distribute. We have the x to the x, and that gives me x squared. I'm going to distribute right here. An x times a negative 5 gives me a negative 5x. I am done with that, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that alone and scratch it out. Then I got to remember that it's a negative 10 times x, and it's a negative 10x. Negative 10 times negative 5, it gives me a positive 50. I'm done with that, so I have to add the negative 5x and the negative 10 because those are the terms that are exactly the same. So I have a negative 5x and a negative 10x should give me a negative 15x. Now, if I don't know how to do that, all I do is input negative 5 minus 10 on decimals should give us negative 15. And you can go ahead and do that. Add x squared minus negative 15x positive 50. So that is my answer for that FOIL method. The next FOIL method just changes the x's to v's, and it's the same exact thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and underline my v, and I'm going to distribute the v into the v, and that gives me v squared. Let's distribute the v into the negative 2, so that gives me negative 2v. I'm done with the v's, the first one. Then I'm going to distribute my next term, negative 5, to the v, and negative 5 times v is negative 5v. And then I'm going to distribute the negative 5 times negative 2, which gives me a positive 10. The last step I'm going to do is I'm going to combine like terms. I have the negative 2v and I have a negative 5v. I'm going to go ahead and add those, so that gives me v squared minus 7v positive 10. And that is my simplified form. So that pretty much gives us an overview of our FOIL method. Once again, I hope everyone has learned a little bit about FOIL method. What we're going to be jumping into after this is really looking at converting all these into x's and then taking a look at our quadratic. So one of the next steps that we're going to be doing is we're going to be verifying, okay, what is an axis of symmetry to a quadratic, how to graph a quadratic on decimals, how to figure out what the zeros are, and that the zeros are exactly what a linear is. It's passing through the x-intercept, so our zeros are 0. And then, of course, are figuring out what the domain and the range are, and figuring out what the y-intercept is, and just taking a look at our quadratic. And you're going to be seeing a lot of U-shapes, and those U-shapes are called parabolas, and that is going to be our next lesson that we are going to be going over. I hope everyone learned a little bit about the FOIL method. And once again, if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out at any time. Thank you for your attention.